Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Step Up to the Mic. This is the place for aspiring and established speakers to take the stage, deliver their talks, and bring them directly to you. Today's featured speaker, she is an author of The Room to be Brave, her memoir exploring healing, recovery, and courage. Please welcome to the stage, April Garcia.
Thank you, Rory. Hi, I am April Garcia, and I want to tell you a story from when I was 8 years old. I was eight, and I decided I was going to solve loneliness with magic, and not metaphorical magic, not the believe in yourself kind of magic that adults encourage when talking to children. I mean, actual magic, like cards and coins and milk poured into newspaper, like magic. I was in the third grade. I was in a new school again, and I had no friends still. And rather than do what a normal child might do, which is, I don't know, talk to someone, I thought, you know what kids love? Performance art. So my plan was simple. I would become so dazzlingly, undeniably magical that friendship would be basically unavoidable. So I convinced a teacher, I still don't know how, to let me roam this school with a cart full of tricks, performing for different classrooms like a traveling magician whose main trick was mostly making people slightly uncomfortable. I even had an assistant, and she was a girl from my class. For reasons I really don't understand, she was stuck with me. Together, we wheeled a little table full of tricks down the hallway, like we were headlining the world's saddest Vegas residency. The tricks, they were classic. We poured milk into newspaper and pulled coins from behind people's ears and scarves from boxes that they were never actually empty. And the other students, they just watched, not not with awe so much, and not with delight, more with concern. It was the kind of look that says, is she okay? And every time I rolled into a new classroom, I told myself, this is it. This is the room where it works. Not the milk trick, but where the big trick works. The one where I stop being the weird girl and start being someone worth sitting next to at lunch. That trick, though, it never landed. As it turns out, and I can't believe it took me this long to figure it out, sleight of hand does not fix chronic unpopularity. So after each performance, I packed up my sticky coins and I rolled my little table back down the hallway, and the loneliness just always came with me. So I've thought about that little girl a lot over the years. And here's what I know now that I didn't know then, that she was not just doing magic tricks. She was running, not with her feet so much, but the way you run when you're 8 years old and you have already learned that the world is not entirely safe. So you perform instead, and you stay busy, and you stay dazzling, and you keep moving so that whatever is behind you just can't catch up. And I got very, very good at running. By my 20s, I had run from California to Iowa, and then I ran from Iowa to New York, and I ran from pain into alcohol, and from silence into noise, and from loneliness into every relationship I could find, and then from every relationship when it got too real. And I always told myself that I was moving forward, that forward motion meant progress, that if I just kept going and kept building and kept achieving, I started a nonprofit and a travel agency. I had a career and certifications, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And all the while, I told myself I was healing, but I was not healing. I was just very, very fast. But here's what I want to tell you today. what I wish someone had told me 20 years ago, and that is that trauma does not just happen and then disappear. It builds rooms inside of you. So if you could imagine your house, excuse me, if you could imagine your life as a house, and just stick with me here because this metaphor is going to be doing a lot of work today. But some of the rooms are bright and easy, like the room where you laugh until your stomach hurts, or the room where you feel completely and entirely yourself. The room where someone looked at you and chose you and you felt it down into your bones. But then there are the rooms where you were not chosen, the rooms where someone hurt you, the rooms where you made your worst mistake, or the room where your body failed you, or the room where you were told to be quiet about what happened to you there. Now, you can close the doors on these rooms and you can deadbolt them and you can pile furniture against them and paint over them and you could pretend that they don't exist, but you are still living in the house and you're still carrying every one of these rooms. For me, by my 20s, I was carrying a castle full of these rooms and I had no idea. I thought I was fine. I thought I was thriving. I had a job and a plan and a very impressive ability to never slow down long enough to feel anything. But that is not thriving. That's just really emotional cardio. And I want to tell you about some of my rooms. So, shortly after I was born, I was given up for adoption. And then a year later, I was taken back. That particular room taught me something very early, and that is that love is not safe. Love is conditional, and love can be taken. At 14 years old, after years of chaos and violence at home, I reported my mother to the police. And my brother, who had been my best friend until then, told me that I was ruining my family. That room taught me that your pain hurts other people, to stay quiet, to stay small. Then at 22, I was hospitalized with bacterial meningitis and I nearly died. I came out the other side of that, but I left part of myself in that room. There were parts of my body that I would never get back. And that room taught me that nothing is guaranteed and nothing is safe. And there's another room, one that I kept darker than all the rest. A room I was told in more ways than one that survival meant keeping it locked. So by 25, I was carrying all of these rooms and so many more. And I was drinking to forget that I was carrying them. And here's the complicated, really uncomfortable truth about that is that running works for a while. And then one day it just doesn't anymore. For me that day, I was 46 years old and I had recovered from COVID where I'd spent a week in the hospital and I came home on oxygen. And then shortly after that, I broke my hip. So I was unable to walk. And for the first time in my adult life, I couldn't run anymore, not from my house and not from these rooms and not from myself. So I had spent decades building this life that had looked full from the outside. I had a husband who loved me and a daughter who was the best thing I had ever done. I had a career that was meaningful and where I was successful. But on the inside, I was drowning. So there was a night that I sat alone on my couch and I had a few drinks. And these thoughts just dark and they were painful and they just kept bubbling up. And I poured more drinks, trying to silence the noise that was in my head. But these thoughts, they just kept circling and they were so heavy. And they were the kind of thoughts that tell you that you're a burden and that the people that you love would be better off without you. and that the room you were in could very well be the last one. And I eventually crawled into bed with my husband and I whispered to him and I said, Babe, I can't remember, but I might have taken all the Xanax. And I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I had drank enough that I honestly just couldn't remember. And then everything went dark. The next morning, divine intervention, as it turns out, had led me into bed. So I woke up and my husband was there and he met me with compassion and fear in his eyes. And he sent me to the hospital. And at the hospital, they took everything I had, my clothes and my phone and my underwear and everything. And for the first time in my life, I was not performing. I was not running. I was not dazzling anyone with tricks. I was just still. And it was in that silence, in the most terrifying room I had ever been in, that something in me shifted because I was still here. And somehow in that hospital bed, I understood something for the very first time in my adult life. I understood that I had survived every room that tried to break me, every single one. And I had never once gone back and told myself that. And the healing, it didn't come to me in this one dramatic and cinematic moment. There was no swelling of an orchestra or no single breakthrough that fixed everything. Healing for me became a practice. I started therapy, and that gave me a language to speak about the truths that I had never described out loud. Let me tell you, saying the thing that you've never said out loud to another human being and watching that person stay in the room with you, and that is something. And journaling gave me space between the hurt and my reaction to it. It gave me distance and perspective. Grounding and meditation practices brought me back to my body during moments when my mind decided to take a very dramatic vacation to the past. And finding joy, and I really mean this, it became an act of defiance. Every time I chose to laugh and to travel and to be present with my daughter and to show up for my community, I was telling those dark rooms, you, you do not get all of me. And then there was being of service, which gave my pain a purpose. It took the worst things that had ever happened to me and said, this is useful now. So my story, which I had spent decades trying to outrun, became the thing that helped other people stop running. So while the rooms did not disappear, and I want to be really honest with you about that because I think we do people a disservice when we pretend that healing is erasure. The rooms are still there, but the light inside of them has changed. So what once held shame began to hold compassion, and what once felt suffocating began to feel survivable. And here's the thing about that room that nearly killed me, it became the room where I found my voice. So, what I want to give you today is not magic because I've retired from that work. It is a different kind of framework. It's what I've learned in therapy and in recovery and in 18 months of sobriety and counting, and in the writing of my memoir and in conversations with people who are carrying their own castles and have graciously shared them with me. And it's that you do not have to open every door at once. You can visit a room and you can witness what happened in there. And you can honor the pieces of yourself that you left behind, and then you can leave. And that's it. You're not you're not going back to relive the trauma, and you're not packing bags and moving back in. You are returning as the person you are today, older and wiser. And you can still be a little scared, but you can go back to the person who was left in that room and say, I see you and I remember you. And you, are not forgotten, and you did not deserve what happened here. And every time you return with compassion instead of fear, that room changes. That room where you felt worthless becomes the room where you've learned your own value. And the room of silence becomes the room where your voice is born. And the room where somebody told you that you were too much becomes the room where you finally figured out that you were just exactly enough for the right people in the right life. But I do want to say that this is not a quick process. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that it takes a weekend retreat and a good journal, because some of these rooms took me years. Some of them I'm still visiting, but I can tell you this, that from the other side of the worst night of my life, the rooms that feel the most impossible to return to are usually the ones with most of you still inside of them. And you deserve to get yourself back. So I think about that little girl sometimes. That little girl with the rolling table and the sticky coins and the absolute unshakable belief that if she could just do the trick right, if she could just be enough, then the loneliness would disappear. And I used to think about her with embarrassment and I would cringe, but I don't anymore, because here's what I know now is that she was not pathetic. She was brave. She walked into room after room full of strangers and said, "Look at me. I'm here. And I want," she just didn't know yet that you can't perform your way into belonging. You can only be your way there. So now, if I could go back to that room with that squeaky table in that hallway, I would stop beside her and I would say, "Honey, you can stop performing and you can stop running. And one day you are going to walk back into the rooms that you were most afraid of, and you will find that you are still standing in every single one of them, and that you survived the worst things that happened in those rooms. And that your rooms, they're not your prison, they are your blueprint. And that the life that you are looking for is not somewhere ahead of you past the next achievement or the next move or the next version of yourself you're trying to become. It is waiting inside of the rooms that you are brave enough to return to, because you, exactly as you are, you little magician, you are already worth the life waiting inside that house. So thank you.
April Garcia, everybody. April, that was wonderful. That was
You.
incredibly well done. I've got a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. First, as a speaker coach, I have got to tell you that talk is incredibly well crafted,
Thank you.
incredibly well crafted, and I absolutely have to give you like an unbelievably high mark on the way the work you put into your word choices.
Really.
Yeah, you've chosen so many words to say so many things with the same line. It's really it's packed. It's packed. So
Thank you.
I encourage any of you, if you are listening to this right now and you're like, "What is he talking about?" You missed it. So you know what? Go back and listen again. Don't pay attention to anything else except this lovely lady right here, and listen to everything that she just said, because wow, that was incredibly impactful, and
Thank
loved it.
you. Oh, thank you. So you did not take a nap.
No, take a nap. Oh my goodness. All right, now I'm going to ask you some questions. Here we go. All right.
Excellent.
um, the room metaphor is obviously, I mean, unbelievable. It says so much about all of it. Is that something that you came up with, and where does that come from? How'd you come to that?
Yes. So it was a journey, of course, as anything is. When I became sober, 18 months ago, I decided it was time finally, now that I had some clarity, that I would go back and start to heal the traumas from my life and I mentioned a few in the talk, but they're they're in the book, and I could write a few more books because I just have experienced a lot of things. So I went on this journey to find the way to heal trauma, and I don't know if you've ever done that, but there are books and books and books and resources on how to do that, and there's so many different ways. But one of the ways that I did that was I met this guy Julio, and Julio does more of a somatic and mindful healing practice where he has you actually meditate on your traumas and really experience them, go back and sit in the moment. And when I was trying to explain my experience with Julio and how I actually could sit in the room of my experience, the more I kept saying I was in the room, but I was in the room. Like you have to be in the room to feel it and experience it and to heal it eventually. I finally was like, oh my God, that's the story. Like that's the experience. Like that's how I was able to finally feel the things that had happened to me. Because I don't know if you experience any trauma in your life, but if you have a significant trauma, a lot of times you can't feel them. So when you go back and talk about them, I could tell you my traumas like I was reading off a menu. And so feeling them is part of healing it. And I couldn't get through that barrier. So sitting in the room actually allowed me to feel it in a way that I hadn't before. So
Wow.
that it kind of was like it was a journey to get there, but I do give Julio some credit on this rooms theory, but mostly it was a lot of the different ways that I found to get back into the room.
Well, I'm glad you met Julio because that is a wonderful metaphor to be using.
Thank you.
The part where you said that your joy was an act of defiance.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that and adopt that as sort of a tool to use?
So right after COVID, I founded this community project called the Find Your Joy Project. And the reason I came to that was during COVID, the room I'm in now is like literal room I'm in now is a craft room, creative space that I have in my house. And this particular space was kind of reserved for joy. I would sew in here. I learned how to sew in here, and I had a Cricut and I had a laser engraver and I had all these crafts that I would do. And as long as I was in this space, COVID didn't exist. So all of that anxiety and that fear and that pain from COVID, it wasn't in here. And this was March, April of 2020. And it triggered something in me where I was like, oh my gosh, putting your hands and your heart into something and finding a space and creating a space for joy doesn't eliminate the fear and the pain and all the things that were happening with COVID, but it did damper it, right? It gave it a softer landing, I guess I could say. So that's kind of where it started. And I started running these community groups where we would go and we would just try new things. So we did a crochet class and like a pole dancing class for exercise. And we took a class on numerology. And I would bring all these women and we would go and try all these things and find our joy. And in that, I found that no matter what else was going on in my life, and there were a lot of things that I still had things happening to me. As long as I made that space and took an active role in looking for joy and keeping it in my life, I could manage the stressors easier. So that was a big change for me.
Love that. Okay, love that. You put your creativity not only into the metaphors, but also into building the tools
Yeah,
to kind of go through this.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta love that. So, the the metaphor about the rooms, it's the rooms change then when you sort of shed light on them by discussing them, confronting them. Your metaphor
Yeah.
there.
Yes, exactly. So when you think about, I don't know if for you, but when you were listening to the talk, or even just think about the idea of rooms, is there a room that you particularly that you're like, oh crap, and you think of a room?
Hmm.
Does that do that for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And I think it does it for a lot of people because we compartmentalize these experiences into the space where they happened. I don't, however, recommend like people just kick down a door and like barrel into a traumatic room because I think there is still a lot of fear and a lot of pain that is held in those spaces. So what I did, and I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but now what I do for each space is that I go back in pieces, essentially. So journaling gives me the space to talk about the experience or talk about just the room itself. It had pink walls and I had a pink daybed and a blue carpet and there was a nail polish stain on the carpet over here from when I was 9 or whatever it is. So you could talk about the room in other contexts. And then journaling gives me a space to write about, again, not necessarily the one traumatic experience there, but other experiences in the room that kind of gets your foot in the door of that room. And then meditation gives you a space to sit in that space. So there are a lot of different layers to get into the room, and piece by piece, you can build the room and that experience until you can go back and realize that I'm going back in, not as, say, the 14-year-old girl that was in there in the first place, but now as me, 47, a survivor with the knowledge that I have, and going back and realizing that once you go back now as yourself, as this adult changed person, it's not as scary. And so the room does shift a little bit because it doesn't hold the same weight that it did when you were, say, 14 or 9 or 25 or whatever it was. So it changes the light a little bit.
Wow. The book that you wrote then, The Room to Be Brave, is this your story of what you've been through, self-help,
Yes.
just give anybody an idea of what they can expect when they go look the book up.
So the book is it's a memoir,
Okay.
and that's how I intended to write it, and it's kind of taking a life of its own, but it's a memoir, so it is my story. It starts with my childhood and it leads in, and each chapter is told as a room that I did return to and what
Wow.
happened in that room and how I was able to change the perspective. So it is descriptive. This is what happened, and this is how I felt at the time, and now this is how I feel looking back. And then as you get further into the book, I don't want to say it's like a redemption arc, but it really is. Like I do a lot of healing. And then at the end of the book, I do tell you the tools that I use to go back. So it's a little self-help, it's a little memoir, it's a little dark humor, it's a lot of my personality. So it's a lot of things.
Wow. All right.
But
I Go
oh,
ahead,
sorry,
please.
real quick. One thing
Yeah.
that I want to mention is that while you may not have experienced the same types of traumas that I have in the whole medical and emotional and alcohol and whatever they are, I feel that everyone who I've talked to so far has found an experience that they connect with that I've
Mhm.
been through and that's in the book. So you won't see yourself in the entire book, but I guarantee you'll see yourself somewhere.
Somewhere in the book. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't stop for a minute and just congratulate you. 18 months of sobriety is absolutely fantastic. So
Thank you.
congratulations on that. That is
Thank you. I
really amazing.
appreciate that.
Really
Thank
amazing.
you.
And good luck on the next 18.
Thank
You've
you.
got it, I'm sure.
I'm sure of
Yep. That is
it.
absolutely wonderful. The As I'm listening to you, it came into my mind. Do you need to create a room to heal?
That's a great question. So that's complicated because I do feel like I healed in those spaces and,
Hmm.
metaphorically, but I also do have a space that's mine that is safe. So I think that in like a bigger picture of not necessarily creating one specific space that you heal in, I think that having your life in a place that feels safe will help you to return to the rooms. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I couldn't have done this if I wasn't sober. And for me, so my alcohol use disorder was heavy enough that I was creating more and more traumatic rooms to go back to. And I didn't have the clarity to go back. So sobriety, I guess, became that safe room for me.
Hmm.
So physically and literally, I don't think necessarily, but as a whole, I think you should find a way to create a life for yourself that is safe for you to go back to.
Nice. The title itself, The Room, to be brave, right?
Yes.
That suggests that, hey, I know I need to heal these rooms, but I need this room. This is the room where I'm going to go to be the brave version of me so that I can go to the other rooms. And I just
Yeah.
wondered if maybe that was something that I was getting or if that was not
And
intended.
the almost the room as in the space. Give yourself the space and time to heal. So as I mentioned, it doesn't happen in a weekend retreat in a journal. It does happen over time, and you have to give yourself that room, so that space to heal.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Um, I have one more question for you. Before I get to
Sure.
that, let me make sure that we get some contact information out there for everybody. So,
Of course, absolutely.
how can they reach you? How can they find out more about the book?
So the book is on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, and if you're in New York, Long Island, it is in a bookstore called A Book Place in Riverhead. And I have a website, aprildaygarcia.com, and I'm on social media at The Room to Be Brave.
The Room to Be Brave. At The Room to Be Brave. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Wonderful. My last question. You're clearly sharing this to help other folks. I mean, at least
Yes.
I'm guessing that that's why you're doing this. So, as people are listening to this, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, you can't help but listen to this talk and not go to your own room
Yes.
somewhere and recognize that and start realizing how scary it might be, how painful it might be. We immediately shut the door and walk back out and go, well, I'm just going to go back to the talk because I don't have any interest in being in this room right now. As people hear that talk, as they read your book, and as they start to encounter their own room, what's a good first step for the people who are listening to this right now to
That
start moving forward through the house?
Great question. First, recognize that you have rooms. Recognize that there are things in your life that you have blocked off and you've hidden and you've run away from. I think that's a huge first step is noticing that they're there. I would also suggest find a therapist or find a trusted person that you can speak with and buy a journal. For the love of God, buy a journal. I can't tell you how many people's journals start with, I don't know why April told me to do this. It's dumb and it's not going to work. And it continues on for 47 pages. So, and I tell people, go ahead, start it that way. Be like, April, this stupid journal, because it works. Find a meditation practice. Use those tools to get into the room and don't just kick down the door and go in on your own because it can be very re-traumatizing. So get help, find a therapist and find a way through. But that you are going to be afraid. They are scary. My rooms were scary too, and I never thought I could go back and sit in some of these spaces. And it does take bravery. And I think that's why like the room to be brave is part of that. But bravery is not just being afraid, or bravery is not about going into these rooms and not being afraid. It's about being afraid and going in anyway.
Yeah.
So, find that bravery in yourself and find the tools that you need to go in.
Mm. Okay, love that. Love that. All right. April Garcia, author of The Room to Be Brave, her memoir, exploring healing, recovery, and courage. Your talk was amazing. You're amazing, and I'm sure the book is amazing. I can't wait to read it. April, this has been wonderful. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Absolutely. Folks, this has been another just absolutely wonderful episode of Step Up to the Mic. If you're an aspiring or current speaker and you want to bring your talk to the masses, message us today. Never stop talking and let us help you to step up to the mic.